Welcome to the deep dive. Thank you for joining us. And if you are not a part of Inside Texas, now's the time. You can smell the grass cut. You can hear the pads popping. We've got football coming up, folks. And if you want to be a part of the best conversation out there with respect to the Longhorns or even college football in general, go visit Inside Texas and join. This is the place to get the best practice recruiting updates. And please like our video and subscribe to the Inside Texas Football YouTube channel. It's not enough just to watch. Make sure you subscribe. It really helps us out. And hey, it's free. Costs you nothing. And you're supporting us and good content. So if you want to keep that delivered, hit subscribe. Oh, we're down a baby, but we've still got Ian Boyd. We are going to talk a little bit about something that's been front and center the last week or so. That's the running back room at the University of Texas. They are like the drummer in Spinal Tap. They keep losing them in different ways. Of course, they lost CJ Baxter early, and most recently just lost Christian Clark, the freshman running back. Now they're down to 3 scholarship running backs, and the University of Texas is looking at some options. So let's talk about what those options are. Ian, talk to me. What are some of the on-roster options? And then after that, after you identify them, let's talk about what are some of the traits that we are going to need to make sure that they can play in this running back room.
Well, they still have what might have always been the best player in the room in Jaden Blue. Had a tremendous offseason. He's gained weight. When they lost Baxter, you knew immediately, like, this is going to cost them a little bit, but there may be some positive in Blue just being the guy and Blue getting a higher volume of touches in the offense, because he might be the best player in the offensive skill room at large, right? We'll see. So there's that. There's Trey Wisner, who I think was ideally a year away and a little more strength and reps from being asked to carry a volume role. But he might have been ready either way, and they just had a deep room. So you got 1 and 2, looks decent. I think what you immediately highlighted was, hey, the best, most proven pass protector is the guy that they just lost. The more obvious thing when they lost Baxter was like, hey, the big body volume back is now gone off the table. But the loss of the most sturdy pass protector was also a big, obvious negative. And then it's hard to know what they were going to get from Jarrett Gibson or Christian Clark. I think they both needed a full camp to kind of figure things out. And of course, not only is Clark out, but it's another season-ending injury. So,
yeah, I think that is accurate on where we are now. I think Clark hurts just as a pure depth issue, right? I don't think they were counting on him getting 100 carries over the course of the season. I think it was more that you want to have a body in case the worst happens, or the worst keeps happening to the University of Texas running back room. So we've got 3 running backs. If they can all stay healthy, we can get through the year and be fine and still achieve what we want to achieve. However, it is a position where people get nicked up, people get dinged, and we've got to look on the roster and figure out what are our viable options to fill in various roles. And one of the things that I think that needs to be looked at is part of this is just a volume problem. You've got 33 to 35 carries per game on average that you need to distribute out. You also have, these guys are all gifted pass catchers, particularly Blue and Wisner. We threw to the back 71 times last year. So I think we're going to at least approach that. So you're looking at, over the course of a year, 450 touches plus. And so if you just look at it on a per game basis, you've got to find a way to distribute out 33 carries and 5 or 6 pass receptions. So Jaden Blue taking a primary role is great. We will break him if that primary role is 23 carries a game and 4 catches. That's just not going to happen. So the question then is, what can we do to distribute that load? And are there some guys who can help pick that up? And we should probably start with some of our options. And I think the 3 that we've come up with are Juan Davis, Colin Page, the walk-on running back from Austin Anderson, who's had some good scrimmages and actually had a really nice high school career and is pretty physically developed. And then what's our third guy? Are we looking at Ryan Niblett?
I mean, they have looked at Ryan Niblett, as Eric reported recently. And he also reported that Niblett had some problems with ball security, which is just a no-go. I mean, if you think about what snaps, to your point, do they need to fill? They need to fill maybe a couple change of pace snaps a game in the middle of a game, maybe some pass protection snaps on third down. That's a great time to get. That's a great time to get your smaller running backs off the field. Is when it's like, hey, we're just blocking here anyway. It's 3rd and 11, whatever. And then there's the end of game snaps where it's like, we need to run out the clock.
Yep.
You cannot play somebody who fumbles in any of those circumstances. Right?
Exactly. Yeah. And if you look at Ryan Niblett's high school highlights, they're impressive, but he's carrying the ball like out here and just like he's carrying the ball like it's a Hollywood movie. And that's probably not going to work. And some guys, their traits just don't translate to running back precisely the way, at least the traits that we need from our running back. So let's talk about Juan Davis. The big H-back tight end has been around in the program forever. He's a guy that we've always known about his athleticism. He's been praised quite a bit in the offseason and in practice for his blocking, which is interesting. And we know he can carry the ball a little bit. He was a dual threat. He sort of played the win the game position at Everman in high school. He carried the ball. He caught the ball. He blocked. He played tuba at halftime in the marching band. You know, that guy. So what could Juan Davis provide? I think pass protection is the first thing that leaps to mind. And you're kind of doing it within the structure of the existing offense. There's already sets where he's called as the move tight end to be in the backfield, right? We know he can catch the ball, so that's another check in the box. Is he a guy that you could line up in the backfield, Ian, credibly in 3 wide, and the defense says, hey, that's not a ball carrier. Let's go with the light box. Could you hand the ball off to him and he gets 7-8 yards? I don't know. What do you think?
That'd be the big question, right? One of my favorite high school offenses that I've ever watched was the I want to say the junior year Hudson Card Lake Travis offense. And what they did by the playoffs was they had basically a fullback tight end guy at running back, and then a flex move tight end at tight end, and then no running back. And so their big fullback kid could run the ball some and be a credible threat between the tackles. But he wasn't like a real running back, right? He was a H-back guy, but they'd line him up at running back. But what that enabled them to do was their blocking when they either ran with Hudson Card or they had him drop back to throw was tremendous. Because they could basically get like 12 personnel caliber protection because they had basically 2 tight ends on the field and still have 3 legitimate receivers flexed out. So I do think the Juan Davis at running back could be an amazing third down scheme if he is just good at running back pass protection from a different alignment, which it seems like reasonable if he gets enough reps that he could do that, but we'll see. For like a 1st and 10 thing where he really needs to actually be able to run the ball on inside zone for it to work, that feels like a maybe. That feels like a much higher bar to clear. And if they had a running quarterback, you'd feel better, but they don't. And so I don't know. I'd have a lot of questions.
A guy we don't have questions about his high school productivity is preferred walk-on Colin Page from Austin Anderson. His senior year, Ian, in 10 games, he rushed for over 1,700 yards, and darn near had 1,000 yards receiving. He had 920 yards receiving, scored 28 touchdowns, and pretty productive guy. 270 yards a game in high school is pretty good. He's a bigger guy, like 210, 5'11". He's strong. He doesn't lack physicality. I think this is a guy who could be our best volume, let's distribute some carries option. And I think he's a guy who takes the game seriously. He knows his assignments, all that. You're not going to be worried putting him in the game. I can't speak to ball security, but I haven't heard anything in the negative. Is there any reason that you wouldn't want to just mix him in some of these situations where ordinarily you might be keeping in Trey Wisner to eat some of those carries? The game is well in hand. In other words, it's very tempting to get Wisner but I think he's going to be getting snaps in the first and second quarter. Izzy loves that idea. He's going to be getting snaps in the first and second quarter. So I think that cleanup role could go to Colin Page theoretically. Is that something that we should look at?
I think so. I think Colin Page is the most likely to be comfortable. And like, if you're just like, we're just going to run the ball, we're not going to risk a mesh where the quarterback has to put it in the running back's hands and we cannot fumble. If you just want to line up in like the pistol or under center and run the ball to run out the clock, Colin Page is most likely to be steady there. I think he's the least likely to fumble. He's like 210 pounds. My questions with him are basically athleticism and is there a better option that they could add that we'll get to in a minute? Because I think I've seen his track times and I've seen some of his Anderson film, which looks pretty good. And I don't think there's any question of whether he has the overall speed to play in college at running back. But I'm not entirely sure. Maybe you can speak to this if you've watched him more carefully than I have. I'm not entirely sure if he has the lateral agility to be able to like find somewhere to stick his head down and get 2 or 3 yards at the end of a game. If he does, then I feel like y'all are in pretty good shape. You could just use this guy in a pinch and you're okay.
Yeah, I think he's not your outside zone guy from 3 wide. I think Colin Page is your guy that you line up in the pistol, you go double tight, and you run downhill. It's man gap blocking schemes, and you're trying to move the chains and push people around and play that brand of football. And and if you need to throw off that, you can play action off of that and still throw downfield and all that. So, and obviously he's a very adept receiver. He's got great hands. So yeah, I think he's a legitimate option. Let's talk about who we haven't said. We kind of dismissed Ryan Niblett for ball security reasons. A lot of people bring up Silas Bolden, and I'm sure we'll hear it in the comments. Silas Bolden weighs 157 pounds, guys. So he's not going to help you in blitz pickup. He's not going to run between the tackles. And I understand that y'all are going to post a highlight of him taking a fly sweep or an end around at Oregon State where he, logged I think he's logged like 20 carries over his entire career. That's all cool. And we're going to run him in that respect. He is not a solution to a volume problem. He is not a solution to a pass protection problem. He's just not a solution at running back. And I understand that we will have a set where he'll line up at running back at some point and he'll run the ball on a misdirection and people will go, see? But he's not a guy that we want to hand the ball off to 50, 60, 70 times over the course of the season. Is that fair?
Yes. And the same is probably true for Niblett. Niblett is kind of a different version of the same problem.
Yeah, he's bigger, but size doesn't always convey. There's a guy at your work right now, people, who is the same height and weight as Roy Jones Jr. in his prime, but he looks very different from Roy Jones Jr. with his shirt off. So height and weight is not always descriptive of your physical traits and your physicality, etc. The other guy that had been experimented with is Darren Gillette, the linebacker from East Texas, who's a very athletic guy. I mean, ran on the 4x100 on his track team, did play some running back in high school. I think that experiment is over. I think that they are going to just put him back at linebacker. We'll see. Obviously, things can change. And then I've seen some, blue ocean ideating of people throwing up Anthony Hill running back highlights from high school. We're not going to get our Mike linebacker and one of the most important player in that position room injured because we don't have a fourth running back. So I would say that's fun to think about. And I'm sure Jere Bledsoe is also fun to think about, but I don't think that's the direction we're going.
Yeah, I mean, if Blue and Weisner are injured, and it's like Gibson, Page, anything else that they can find, scrounge that we'll talk about in a minute, or Anthony Hill at that point, then it's like maybe at that point you slide him over, right? That's like that's the in case of emergency bullhorn. There, you do not need to rep that in fall camp.
No, we're describing our current situation. We reserve the right to panic later in September or October if more events unfold. Let's talk about off-roster options. But before we do that, I want to thank our sponsor, Gabe Winslow. You can reach him at 832-557-1095. Mortgages by Gabe. Gabe has been a longtime supporter of Inside Texas and all things Texas. In fact, he's a very generous NIL contributor. But Gabe is a guy who's really sharp at what he does. He's been in the industry for over 20 years. Former National Merit Scholar, has a law degree. Really overqualified to be doing this job, Ian. He must do it purely out of love, not the compensation. But Gabe's really sharp. He's really smart. He's not going to steer you wrong. And this is the most important financial transaction, buying a house, that you'll ever perform in your life. You need the right people in your corner. You need people that actually care about you. You need people that are really, really, really competent and sharp. I don't know why so many people rely on like the B team when they're making the biggest financial decision of their life. Don't do that with Gabe. Give him a call. If he's not your first call, make sure he's your last call. 832-557-1095. All right, Ian, I want to talk about those off-roster options that we want to move onto our roster with the help of Gabe Winslow and Laura Baker. Who are they? And let's talk about the sort of the rules and all this with the portal. So what I brought up, and I mentioned to a couple of people, and it could be worth exploring, and I don't have any specific info. I'm just spitballing here. But both Fresno State and Utah State lost their coaches. That opened up the 30-day window. That just happened. And Fresno State, Jeff Tedford, the long, great football coach at Cal and Fresno State, he's having to do it for health reasons. So our prayers to him. And then Utah State fired Blake Anderson, who's a really good offensive mind, really good offensive coach. It was a Title IX thing that I don't know exactly all the details on, but he's been fired. That opens up the 30-day window at both schools. The University of Texas can contact their players, and both teams have running backs. So I was looking at it, and there's a guy named Robert Briggs Jr., who was sort of splitting time at Utah State. He is from Belleville, Texas. He's a whopping 5'6", 185 pounds, but he's a former 10'9", 100 meters guy, former 3-star. He is the guy that was a legitimate option for Utah State last year in a fairly prolific offense. He could be someone worth talking to. He was paired with another guy that we don't have any connections to, but he was the bigger back. He was about 200, 205, and he was a little bit more productive than Briggs. Fresno State, I've actually seen their starting running back play on college, watching college football. His name is Malik Sherrod. He's from Oxnard, California. He's all of 5'8", 180 pounds, but he rushed for 966 yards last year, 5.6 yards per carry, and he also caught 44 balls. So I've looked at his highlights, and I've actually seen him play live. He is a good, explosive, tough little dude. He is 5'8", 180, and that's probably why he's playing at Fresno State instead of USC. But these could be potential options that we could contact that you kind of want to sell the opportunity at the University of Texas. The other option is you can enter your name in the portal at the appropriate time, and that was earlier in the summer. But if you never remove it, you are still viable to participate in the transfer window. So if you go to On3 and you go to their portal page, you'll see a list of running backs, guys from Old Dominion and Louisiana Tech. Squirrel Williams is on there, Ian, of Baylor fame. He still weighs 170 pounds soaking wet after 5 or 6 years of college football.
Imagine that.
But this group of guys, not exactly elite, or they've got issues, quote unquote, that may have them in the portal. I don't know. You have to research their options. That they list mostly just FBS options or G5 options. The FCS could be an option as well if you have a back at a Montana State, South Dakota State, some of these sort of power programs. Some of these guys are viable, and I would consider them roughly equivalent to a Colin Page or maybe even a little better, just because they've had 200 carries in college. So these are our off-roster options. I am somewhat convinced that Texas will explore this avenue, and if the fit is right, I think we could be adding someone to the football team. Football is a little different, but we've got to start thinking about it differently, Ian. If you're in AAA and you're 2 games out of first place for the Duluth Mud Hens, and the Houston Astros call you up, you don't say, I love these guys, I love this team, we're going to win our division, I can't come up. You go to major leagues when you get the call. College football might be getting more and more like that, where if you're at a lower profile G5 or FBS school, when Texas comes calling, even though you're going to be the starting running back, even though you've got all these friendships, you might just have to make the business decision and go where the spotlight is. So I don't know, Ian, what do you think about off-roster options as a potential solution?
I think that does get tricky, though, because if you're talking about like a legitimate player that's being counted on at either an FCS Power or a Fresno State, they may actually get NIL counteroffers at their own school.
Yep.
So like North Dakota State, for instance, for one, they probably don't. It's going to be like Colin Page, so it's probably not worth the squeeze at a place like that. For another, that's like the program in North Dakota. There's probably some fracking money that could be found, venting out of the fumes that will pay for them to keep that guy. So I don't know. I feel like it has to be kind of like it would end up being somebody pretty unexciting. It's like maybe if Texas puts together an NIL offer and 4th string running back at Texas or 3rd string running back at Texas, maybe they could get a guy that's thinking NFL that only has a year left. But I think you're right, but I think it's still a little bit of a hard sell, and it depends on what Texas is willing to offer. What's presumably Jarrett Gibson has a pretty decent NIL offer. So it's like, what are you going to tell a new guy? And how's Jarrett Gibson going to respond if it's like if you bring in a guy over him, right?
Yeah, so I think that's where the appeal of like a Malik Sherrod from Fresno State is there, because he's a 1-year rental. He's a senior, and he's got proven college performance. I mean, you guys can go pull up his highlights. I'd love to show them to you, but we're not allowed to. We'll get a strike from YouTube and all that nonsense. So anyway, that is an option. And again, I think if the stars line up correctly, Texas will take an off-roster option. And I think that guy, if he's good enough, would be your 3rd team running back, which, I think has some selling value and could be interesting. There's even value in the sell of like, hey, you need to start getting used to playing against and practicing against these bigger bodies that are going to be in the NFL. You're not really getting that necessarily at Utah State, Fresno State quite as much. Certainly there's some players there that'll play in the NFL, but you talk about 1 or 2 instead of 10 to 14. So
Texas also has that playoff stage. Hey, if you come here and you're a third or fourth string, you could end up playing on a playoff stage, or like in the Michigan game or in the Georgia game. And then you are in front of 5 times the number of NFL scouts that you would have been otherwise. So if you find a guy that really thinks they might have a chance in the league that's available at this point for some reason, then there is that pitch. That is a pretty good pitch.
Yep, I think that's it. I think that is the pitch. And Ian, this is a area of content in which I hope we don't revisit it later, a couple of months from now, because it'll probably not be a good thing unless there's some loophole we're unaware of. And the starting running back at Tennessee, Dylan Sampson, decided he's always wanted to play for the real UT. I don't think that's going to happen, but if it does, we'll let you know. Otherwise, that is sort of the situation in the Longhorn running room, both off roster and on roster. If you like Ian Boyd and his excellent analysis, the Inside Texas board's not sure about his basketball analysis. There's an important poll going on right now, but his football analysis, we're absolutely sure about. You can read about that at America's War Game on Ian's Substack. Just Google it, look it up. It's really good. It's really interesting, incisive commentary on the broader college football arena. And then if you guys want the ultimate preview for the University of Texas, for the SEC, for the 2024 Longhorn season, go buy the 2024 Longhorn Football Prospectus, Thinking Texas Football. You can find it at Amazon, Apple, Smashwords, and it's a great read. And it's 157 pages of more analysis than you can imagine, to include the Longhorn running back room. And finally, we want to thank our sponsor, Gabe Winslow, for being a mensch, for sponsoring us, and for being such a great servant to the Longhorn people. This has been the Deep Dive featuring Paul Wadlington, Ian Boyd, and intermittently Izzy Boyd. Hook 'em. We'll see y'all next week.